Hey, good evening, everybody. Joe Ellis here. Just going right into the topics for this week, the writings for this week for the video journal. First one is AP style books, essentially tips and tricks for covering inclusivity, and is basically a list of all the ways that you can go out and find sources that you normally wouldn't otherwise, covering stories of groups of people that you wouldn't typically, and inclusivity in this case meaning in that area, people that typically don't receive a voice, giving voice to those people. There was a few things that I picked out from that. The first being inclusivity and expert commentary. So this essentially means instead of going to whether it be for a political reason or any other kind of story, going to a small university instead of a large well-known university, um, or going to a instead of going to a large nonprofit organization, going to a smaller community-based organization that can provide that same commentary. At first, I had a little bit of issues with that because I figured, why would you not want to go to the most credible source or what people believe is the most credible source to add credibility to your own story? And then, like everything else in this course and the previous few courses, I try to relate everything back to sports just because that's what I want to do. And thinking through it, I actually do the same thing, right? So I'm very interested in the schematic, detailed nature of NFL football, and there's actually a few very small Twitter pages or X pages that produce really great content. So there's one called Honest NFL, and they'll get maybe 15 likes on a lot of their posts. They'll get a bunch of likes on other ones, but a lot of their posts they'll get about 15 to 20 likes. And I still find their content to be very informative and very detailed and just a very good product in general. And I also get content on my Twitter X feed from people that will get, hundreds and thousands of likes on their posts. So I think that kind of meets that, expanding your access to expert commentary that you wouldn't otherwise have. Another one was expand your circle, which I think directly relates to that. So it talks about getting information essentially from sources you otherwise wouldn't get it from, and making sure that you expand your list or your Rolodex of people that you can go to for commentary on different topics. But really, that whole AP style book post was about getting stories from people and giving voices to people who might otherwise not be able to. The second was an article written by Professor Moritz, actually, about objectivity in sports. And the article begins talking about writers back in the early 1900s and what they called the gee whiz era of sports journalism, where journalists would be paid, or their trip with the team would be paid for by the team. And this led to very positive takes on, or humorist takes on teams, and how that started to change as you moved later into the 1900s. Um, and something that I like to pull out from that is, I think we're actually moving a little bit closer to that again. For instance, on a few of the podcasts that I listen to that will cover Philadelphia sports, I hear the phrase team content a lot. And what that essentially means is you're rooting for controversy, which is something that Professor Martz brings up in the article. You're rooting for not necessarily scandal, but something that you can report on and that will generate a lot of traffic to your website or to your podcast or whatever it is. So essentially, you're rooting for a specific outcome. And at the end, Professor Moritz basically comes to the conclusion that fandom will naturally create an environment in sports media that leads us to not necessarily be objective all the time, and is objectivity even an actual result that can that be achieved? And I think that relates to the chapters that we read this week as well, like what is truth and is it possible to get there? And then the last one we talked about, or the last video we watched, was a video about Stella Young, who's giving a TED talk about how essentially her disability is not for other people's inspiration. And what I gathered from her TED Talk was, right, we talked about, actually brought it up in AP style book as well, tokenism, right? People are not there to be the token, whatever it is, as you see it in a lot of media. Um, and so I think one thing that we did last class, or for me was the last class, also with Dr. Matthews, is we had these sheets called right inclusion, and for each group of marginalized individuals or individuals that don't receive as much publicity or media, they different kinds of stories you can tell about those people that would more benefit that group of people and isn't, as much focused on tokenism. So I think just good stuff to know all around. So have a great week.